For today's episode, we will be talking about sex and porn and stuff around that can be activating to some people. A little warning there that how you're listening, the language that we'll be using may be offensive to some people. Just take care of yourself as you're listening.
Sex and porn addiction, real or fake? People say it's not in the DSM, which means that you can't actually diagnose it. There's not enough research. It's highly controversial. Our society is really highly sexualized as it is. We live in a culture that really promotes addiction. There's a lot of objectification anyway. Like, isn't it normal? Why are we talking about addiction? We're just trying to add labels at that point. And it's seen as really sex negative. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We're your hosts, Magnolia Heaton, licensed clinical social worker, and I specialize in complex trauma treatment and integrative mental health, CSAT, CMAT.
And I'm Ethiopia, emotional wellness practitioner who specializes in complex trauma and sex and porn addiction.
Awesome. So welcome back. Thank you for being here for our 10th episode. Exciting times. Yes. Really, we're going to focus on what this is. Is it real or fake? We talked a little bit about the counter arguments and in the CSAT community, there's an email that came through about TikTok that had all kinds of views, and that person, I think, is a therapist and argued that sex addiction isn't real. I see their points. I could see why, especially being on the outside. But I think when you really work on yourself and you really do your best to address your intergenerational trauma, you'll see that the patterns are there. And even if they're subclinical, so where they don't actually meet criteria for addiction or anything like that, it still does push you naturally into being able to just be really discerning with you, yourself, your behaviors, your emotions, your sexuality, and how you carry yourself about the world. And inevitably, it'll bring cohesion. If we're looking at it from that lens, sexuality in general is on a continuum. And as we talked about in our previous episode, our episode 9 that was on enmeshment, continuums in general of human behavior tend to be on the spectrum of binging and more anorexic behaviors, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about sex and porn addiction, yes, but we wouldn't be doing our due diligence if we didn't also give an honorable mention to sexual anorexia, which can also happen for a ton of different reasons. I'll go into that briefly. Sexual anorexia is essentially swearing off sex or having a lot of hypoarousal. I'm not saying that people don't have medical issues, that don't have depression or things like that that reduce libido, because that's absolutely true. At the same time, if you look at sexual anorexia, it's important to look deeper. Often, if not always, there tend to be several layers to that. Hormonal imbalances, yes. Depression, sure. Unresolved grief, some kind of enmeshment in the family system that occurred, right? Or some boundary violations of some other kind, because enmeshment is a boundary violation. Covert incest, overt incest, lots of different things that can actually contribute to sexual anorexia.
I'm glad that you brought that part in because it makes so much sense that it can be as equal as the outwardly addictive to be very restrictive in that way.
And then it's so normalized too, especially in mainstream couples therapy, like, oh, well, it's fine. Just look at any couple and then what somebody's gonna have a lower level of desire, right? And yes, that is true. Also, let's look deeper, and this is the point. This episode is catered to everybody, whether you're just a layperson who's here, you're a family or friend who's watching, your colleague in the typical therapy world, or a CSAT type of colleague. It's for everybody. Anyone can take anything away from here. Okay. Now, sex and porn addiction, slightly different. Obviously, one has to do with sex, right? The other one has to do with porn. But Ethiopia, is going to talk a little bit about what she sees as like a gateway drug type of thing that porn is. But we'll say both of them are very insidious, they're highly normalized, and they're increasingly common. Risk factors for porn addiction are being able to spend a lot of time alone or being forced to spend a lot of time alone, having a lot of disconnection, whether that is socially, familial, both, having a lack of purpose, having a lot of stress, having a personality that tends toward that binging behavior anyway, more input or output. Having a history of addiction, having hypersexuality. If you didn't know, ADHD tends to have a component of a lot of hypersexuality. Not always the case, but they are often seen together. It's just something to be mindful of. Having a history of childhood sexual abuse, media consumption, whether that is seeing images that are sexual in nature, comparing oneself to other people, seeing it on social media or people talking about it, music too, it's everywhere. And then family dynamics are really important too, which is why we focus on parenting. You can look at our previous episodes, which I'm in the parenting here and there, and we're going to do it again today. It is in there. We have enmeshment, which is when people are too close, or alienation, which is when people in a family have too much distance, not enough emotional intimacy, not being able to be seen, not enough individuality. And then we have objectification under the family dynamics as well, which is being seen as an object. You're here, you're my child, you serve my needs, you have this one function in the family system, instead of being seen as a person with feelings and needs and things like that. Narcissistic family systems, families with addiction as well. That are some risk factors. They're not the full risk factors, but there's some porn exposure in general or sexualized image exposure in general. Oftentimes, what we see is a lot of children who stumbled upon any porn when they were little, or even like seeing nudity in videos or music videos or anything like that, that can still trigger a lot. At the end of the day, we're still human. We're all created with a sexual component, whether we connect to it or not. So then, yes, naturally, when we see images that are hypersexual, we are going to connect to that. That is going to impact our physiology, our psyche, our emotion. So all of these things are important to note.
I am so excited to talk about the gateway. So excited to talk about this gateway. Okay, so there's so much that you said that I was like, okay, well, this is what I want to do. Address the elephant in the room. First of all, we are socialized to believe that the body itself is somehow just sexual. This is why in our culture, folks have to cover up, or, like you have people that are upset that look at the bathing suit she's wearing and these kinds of things. The body is just the body. Yet, when we're coming from a viewpoint that is puritanical, then it becomes that the body is somehow at just being seen naked, it becomes a problem and like, why is that a problem? Why is a naked body a sexualized body? That in and of itself is a problem. And it's not everywhere. I'm gonna give a shout out. Now, when I went to Brazil and I went to Argentina, it's many years ago now. Um, yeah, like how people are able just to chill. And here, um, well, I can't speak for the whole United States, but I've been to places in the United States where it's like, women, you have to wear a cover up. You can't just be in the bikini. Why not? And real talk, because I work with men who have sexually offended, like covering up doesn't protect you. It doesn't. I want folks to feel comfortable in the ways that they feel comfortable. The body is just the body. The body is not inherently a sexual object. That is a program, that is a conditioning, that is a socialization that allows that narrative to even exist. Now, building on that piece, right? We get to understand why when you see titties, you can just be like, oh, because now the body is objectified, particularly the body that is identified as woman, girl, female. And it exists for everybody, but specifically that, right? So you mentioned like the videos and stuff like that. Like, yeah, because just having a body that is covered in a particular way, a body that has breasts, a body that has hips, that this becomes this thing that is sexual that is not inherently sexual. That is a part of the objectification. For me, what I recognize is the slippery slope is first of all the conditioning that you undergo to allow the objectification. Porn is just objectification manifest into videos or uh reading materials like the media. Porn is just that, and it is noted as one of the most problematic things that a young person can engage with and can determine outcomes for problematic sexual behaviors. We learned porn is one of the reasons for erectile dysfunction. It creates a distortion in the mind around what is real because you're watching people. I was sharing this with a young person the other day. This it's a young man. They were like, "How do I know if I'm having sex with a woman? How do I know if they're enjoying it? Does it sound like what it sounds like in porn?" I'm like, "Well, it could sound like that because we're already socialized to be like that's what it sounds like." So considering that there is a landscape that porn is a gateway that is built on a slippery slope of programming and conditioning around the objectification of bodies, period. And that turns into problematic sexual behaviors because now you are only a sex object. You're doing your daily jog and you have on shorts that are too short. You're wearing a sports bra. And that is what really leads. The thing with porn too is that porn builds off of a societal narrative that uses sex to sell. You hear people say, "Oh, that food looks sexy." Eating food is like it's like having sex. Everything is sexualized. In that way, as a person, how do you actually determine boundaries and clarity when everything is so skewed towards problematic sexual behaviors?
Exactly. Thank you for that. Some of the risks of developing a porn addiction or a sex addiction are developmental age. The younger people are when they're exposed to porn, the greater the risk they have. The brain develops in a specific sequence. If we interrupt that development by introducing pornography, a part of the self splits there. And then a part of that person, let's say someone was exposed at age 5 or age 8, then a part of their sexuality is going to maintain frozen at age 5 or age 8, especially if there's a lot of secrecy around the like, hey, I discovered porn, I'm just going to keep watching porn instead of telling my parents or something so they can help me organize that experience for myself and integrate it. Oftentimes, what happens is people are exposed to pornography and then they don't tell their parents, and then nobody knows. And then there's a lot of secrecy, a lot of shame that comes with that. And then that's what complicates everything, right? Then we have ramping up of behaviors is a consequence of porn addiction. So I know we'll get into that a little bit more, but like you said, I mean, it's like everything's already hypersexualized. Like sexy car, that car is so sexy. Like, what does that mean? Would you have sex with the car? No. Like, well, maybe. Shouldn't.
Maybe, maybe. But wait a minute. No, okay, I'm not going any further than that, but maybe. But I just want to pull back just a little bit
Yeah.
because This is the other part about parenting that's so important. When the child is exposed to something and yet does not tell you, there's something that is happening there that doesn't allow them to tell you. There has to be safety. And I am a proponent of like I started speaking to my son about different things with his body and sex. I did it as a preventative measure to avoid sexual exploitation and sexual abuse. Yet, what I find is that because I've always been talking to him about it, it's nothing for us to have a conversation. Now, if you avoid the topic until the child is like 14, and then you want to have an awkward, like, come, we're going to sit down, we're going to talk about the birds and the bees. They're like, wait a minute, where's this coming from? This idea about developmentally appropriate, everything is developmentally appropriate when you're talking to a child about how their body works, how society works. You just put it in the language that they can receive. But that part is really important. It's like that's one of the other issues is that people don't have I couldn't talk to my parents. We were watching this and we were watching that and we were experiencing this and we were engaged in that. Did your parents no, 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 they didn't know anything. Or they found out and they told me to read the Bible. They found out and they shamed me, they beat me, they told me don't do it. They didn't have a discussion with me on exactly what the problem is, but I was punished.
Exactly. And we'll definitely get into that at the end when we talk about recommendations. That is so important to know, though. If the door's closed, we're not talking about sex, it's too awkward. We'll have that conversation one day whenever I'm ready. Okay, well, then it's not going to be an open channel. I like how you said that. You make it normal to talk about sex with your son, right? And yeah, that opens up the door's just open, right? Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
So then risks of engaging in a lot of misuse of porn and misuse of sex. You see a lot of ramping up of behaviors, cravings. It rewires the brain. You can see changes in physiology too. Like you said, it can cause porn addiction can cause erectile dysfunction. It turns into this whole conditioning thing where like I can't have sex unless I watch porn. And then if I watch porn, that's fine, but it has to be the right specific kind of porn. It has to be just intense enough, but not too intense. Because if it's too intense, then I won't be able to have sex anymore. It's really, really complicated and really, really murky, so it can really mess with sexuality at that rate. It does get in the way of relationships, and it can be considered infidelity in some relationships, especially if it's like, okay, we have this thing where we don't watch porn without each other, right? That's a boundary, but then it can lead to consistent boundary violations because the pornography addiction becomes a whole entity of its own. I've seen situations where it can be used up to like 14 hours a day or even longer, right? You're using porn in the shower, you're using it in the bathroom, you're using it and you can't go to sleep, using it at work, using it like as you're around your kids. Like it can just be so all-consuming. Social media can be really all-consuming. That doesn't even always have the sexual factor. So to have all of these circuits, right? And we have circuits in our brain that are wired for sexuality, for reproduction, and it is natural for us to be gravitating toward these experiences, yes, though there are risk factors.
Porn at work, like porn to the extent that they could not engage sexual intimacy with their partner because they had already jacked off so much in the day. Like 14 hours, I mean, they are binging on it to the extent that there are sores, there's pain, yet it's not just watching the porn. That it's not just I'm gonna turn it on and watch it. I'm turning it on and I'm going to masturbate. Even with the consequence of having a penis that is covered in sores from how much you're doing it, that you can't stop doing it.
Or for people with vaginas, even having like vaginal lesions and bleeding and all infections and different things like that too. It can get really bad. I remember I had a friend one time who had challenges with this and said they masturbated at least 5 times a day and they absolutely had to so that they could sleep and they had a shower and there was this whole ritual around it. Like pretty bad, it can get pretty bad. And so to that point, it can also lower self-esteem because of these shame components that go with it, with the secrecy, with the ritualization, with like, I can't handle it by myself. I should be able to. It's normal, but I'm not normal. And also by social comparison, because you're watching pornography and like you have people with similar bodies to you, maybe. And then like, it's like, well, I'm not that skinny, or I'm not thick enough, or I'm fat, but I'm not that thick, right? Or so many things there. I don't perform that way, but it's like, okay, but that's not realistic. Like, yes, you see like a 15-second clip or 15-minute clip, whatever, but I mean, that's an all day, multi-day endeavor. It's not like it just was that way. It's edited. It's just not realistic. Really easy to compare oneself.
Just want to drop in this quote from Timothy Kahn, who has been working with youth who have engaged in sexually harmful behavior since the 1970s. Timothy Kahn says, child sexual abuse material and pornography in general is absolutely ubiquitous. Kids are constantly tempted to look at it, and it's available on almost any device. You can access it from your Xbox, your PlayStation, or your Nintendo Wii. I now believe that exposure to pornography is more of a causative factor than is sexual abuse. I've had clients who have been sexually abused and were acting out sexually, but I had more clients who had looked at porn and were acting out sexually. Underscoring the use of porn, early exposure, it's easier now than before because of the internet. That early exposure is being seen more and more as a risk factor in having problematic sexual behaviors.
Which, by the way, if you show any child pornography, that's a crime. That's considered sexually abusing a child. Just as a note there.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? When I think about like the evolution, you had images, you had magazines, then you got videos, these kinds of things. I'm sure that there were probably some erotic, records made for folks to listen to because, there's all of that within the genre. Now I'm on Facebook and I'm scrolling and all of a sudden I'm watching pornography. I'm like, wait, hold on a second. How is this even on there? I remember watching a video. Some people were talking and they were like, yeah, like my child was able to see stuff on TikTok and blah blah blah. So I went and asked my children. My son was like, yeah, it's on TikTok, of course. Like, yeah, yes, it's there. So again, I'm thankful that I have these conversations with my children. It's out there, it's accessible. Roblox. Even at this point, I know that there's work around creating safer environments for children. Yet, even when you go to the comments and people are saying, yo, there needs to be some more legal action for companies to be held responsible for this, you'll see plenty of people in the comments saying that's the parent's responsibility to make sure that their child is not watching that stuff. That level of diligence you would have to ensure that your child doesn't ever see porn on any of those platforms. I mean, that part is out there too.
Porn as a gateway. Guide us through that a little bit more.
Porn as a gateway. For me, porn is a gateway to compulsive sexual behaviors because of the conditions around pornography. First things first, there is this tension between pornography being everywhere in our culture and not even just pornography, this ability to have like sex out there, like, the sexual act being something that is everywhere, right? It's in ads and so much media, thinking about scenes in the first iteration of Bridgerton. Like, oh, this, those scenes, right? So this stuff is around us all the time. Simultaneously, we have a culture in the United States that is very puritanical. So it's like, don't talk about it. There's something immoral around it, and at the same time, it's pushed. That creates this back and forth between what your morals are and maybe even going against what your morals are, which then creates moral incongruence, thereby moral injury. Now I'm engaged with something. I'm engaged with pornography and I feel bad about being engaged with it because even though it's accessible as it is, I still have shame around using it. It doesn't speak for everyone, yet I think that that is a persistent narrative in the work that I do. Of course, anytime that there's incongruence, right? Moral incongruence is just saying it's like I'm going against the person that I want to be. I'm going against my values. Then that's going to create a whole feeling, a whole cocktail of hormones that are running through your body that is letting you know that something isn't safe and easily taps into feelings of low self-worth and these kinds of things that create a cycle of shame, which for me, again, that is a big part of how I look at addiction. It's like, how is the person tied into this shame cycle that says, I'm not good, I'm a bad person, I can't get things right. And so now the behavior then confirms the belief, and then you're just in this cycle of shame and doing the behaviors that you don't want to do. Going back to the gateway piece, more and more folks are exposed to pornography at earlier ages. And and it's not that porn is going to set the arousal template for someone. However, so many people, porn becomes the template of their arousal, really relying on seeing other people engaged in sexual acts is what becomes the stimulant for me to be aroused. The literature is out there showing that there is something around that being addictive in and of itself. Like now, it's like I don't rely on myself to be aroused. I need to watch something. I need to get my hit that way so that I can even be aroused. So in that way, it can open folks up to shame cycles that keep folks in a cycle of low self-worth, feeling morally challenged and, like I can't get it right morally. Like the person that I am is somehow despicable, it's somehow dirty, it's somehow these kinds of things, because that is how the framework of sex works in our culture as well. It's dirty, it's sinful, it's these kinds of things. So it's like having the person like in this place of tension and incongruence to the extent that now they're in this cycle that creates problematic compulsive sexual behaviors.
Absolutely. And since we're wired to have sex, to procreate, and for pleasure, there is a neurotransmitter cascade that happens whenever we watch pornography. Not just that, but you were saying as we were preparing for this episode that porn can be used as a way to control people's behaviors and it can pigeonhole how sexuality is expressed. I won't go too terribly into detail into that. It does pigeonhole people of like how they express themselves, what they like, what's acceptable to like, what's not acceptable to like. And if everybody's watching porn and they're watching it alone and it's a secretive thing and they watch it at home, but it still impacts how they show up sexually in sexual relationships with people. I think it's just an interesting factor. And then that secrecy piece that keeps the shame alive. And then that keeps the addiction alive. Something that happens with addiction is that there's an increased tolerance. It's like I could be fine and just watch porn for like 2 minutes, but now I need five. Now I need 10. Now I need 20. Now I need 60. Now I need 5 hours to be okay. Right? And that takes a lot of time. That can cause stress. That can cause shame. It can get in the way of relationships. It can have a lot of repercussions. And it can even normalize harmful behaviors as well. And because of that increased tolerance, people can start to be attracted to things that they didn't used to be attracted to. It can really mess with people, right? But going back to normalizing the harmful behaviors, to me, that's a connection that can happen between sex addiction and porn. The satiety isn't enough. I really need more. And so, like, even just watching the porn isn't enough. I need to go act it out, these sexual fantasies that I saw. Again, if that is happening, there are a lot of people who are married who watch pornography and different things like that. And it's one thing to have ethical non-monogamy, it's another thing to be committed in a relationship and have these agreements, but then not adhere to those agreements. Or even if someone isn't married, when we are out of our integrity, as you were saying, whatever it is that our moral standards are, that's where we start to have issues in our lives. Do you have anything else to add to that?
I really appreciate you bringing in all of those pieces there. I am considering watching pornography, how serious it can get. Just what you said, about like, all right, now I'm watching this, now I'm watching that, like there's all these different genres, right? And now all of a sudden I'm into this, and now all of a sudden I'm watching some stuff that is like illegal.
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, the desensitization of and the objectification that happens through pornography as well. Like, thank you so much for bringing that part up.
You're so
Mhm.
welcome. And then just something happens naturally as you have that increased tolerance and that increased exposure. Yes, the objectification and just dehumanization of like, I'm not human, they're not human, women aren't human, nobody's human. And it's not conscious necessarily, but it's just like you're just an object that I just have sex with. And like, okay, but do you see how over time as well that can reduce the pleasure even of having sex? It just causes a lot of issues, erectile dysfunction. I don't remember if we mentioned it or not, but that could be a really big consequence of watching too much pornography.
Let me just jump in and say this thing because this is another piece of it. Many, many years ago, I was hanging out with a group of my homeboys, and we were talking about pornography. They were all like, yeah, the women enjoy it. Those women there, and they're enjoying it. I was thinking like, y'all don't know if we fake it or not. That's the first thing. If I sound like the girl in the porno, how are you gonna know if I'm faking? Like, I know what I'm supposed to say. I'm like, if I say those things, then you're gonna think that I'm having a good time. You're thinking that I'm enjoying it. I could just not necessarily enjoying it. Yet many people can come have a takeaway that they're enjoying it, not understanding that. I mean, it's a real mixed bag with pornography too, with who's doing what and how, right? Because not all of it is consensual. And, people get paid to do it. So now it's about performance. It's not necessarily about pleasure or enjoyment. Maybe there's something there. We have to consider if someone needs like, 5 bottles of lube squeezed over their vagina, like maybe they're not really enjoying
That's facts. Thank you for that.
that.
And here's a big trigger warning to the point of pornography influencing someone to do illegal things. One of the worst case scenarios that we see with pornography addiction is people coming to the point where their arousal templates start involving minors, starting to go down that rabbit hole, or even the route of bestiality and having those illegal videos on their technology, getting arrested, going to prison, different things like that, because it involves the exploitation of minors, period. And this isn't even to mention the use of AI with minors. I mean, what I've heard from credible sources and from even colleagues, people taking the images of minors and then using artificial intelligence to create sexually provocative videos or even pornography based off of these images. So It is tricky, and that's just some food for thought, right? No real recommendations other than to be mindful what it is that you post. I mean, technically anybody can make a video of anybody doing anything at this point if they have the right technology, right? So,
Absolutely. And I just want to just like clarify something there too. In the work that I do, because I work with folks who have offended, we use child sexual abuse materials instead of like pornography because pornography has some element of consent. There's stuff around that too, yet to be explicit that it is sexual abuse of a child in those materials.
yes, and CSAM for short. Excellent point. There's all these things going on in the mind and the physiology. Things are getting wired and rewired constantly and watching the pornography, right? If someone is to be addicted to it and have this problematic, challenging relationship with pornography, that can lead to sexual acting out. But let me go over briefly what the definition of addiction is. If you go to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is what psychotherapists, psychologists, counselors, psychiatrists look into for diagnosing an addiction and other mental health disorders. It's a problematic pattern of use leading to clinically significant impairment or distress. You're doing this thing, it's causing problems in your life. And then there's a certain number of criteria. I believe there's 11-ish criteria for every category. And sex addiction isn't in there, and porn addiction isn't in there yet. And I know that that's an argument that people use for like it doesn't even exist. It clearly does exist. There's a whole field of study, there's a whole field of practice and specialization in this area, and it is extremely complex. It's just that there's not enough research yet. Doesn't mean that there's not going to be. And if you really have an issue with that, I hear you, I validate you, and you can keep listening to the episode or not. I'm not here to argue. I'm just here to explain what my reality is and what we know to be true. Okay. So then the different symptoms are it's often taken in larger amounts or used in larger amounts over a longer period of time that was intended. So that's kind of like a little bit of that tolerance. There's a persistent desire, unsuccessful efforts to cut down on the use. So like that craving aspect. A great deal of time is spent in activities necessary to obtain whatever the addiction is. Craving or strong desire or urge to use. Don't know what's up with my accent today. Recurrent use resulting in a failure to fulfill major obligations at work, school, or home. So you see it starts to like get in the way of things. I mean, there's people who use pornography, have sex in inappropriate situations, relationships, places. Important social, occupational, or recreational activities are given because of use. Recurrent use in situations in which it is physically hazardous. Use is continued despite knowledge of having persistent or recurrent physical or psychological problems that are likely to have been caused or exacerbated by whatever the addiction is. And then that tolerance piece, a need for more in larger amounts to achieve that high. And then a markedly diminished effect. So it's like, even if I still use what I used to use, it just isn't doing it for me, which is why I need more. And then withdrawal is the final piece, which is characteristic withdrawal from said substance or said process addiction. So, like literally having withdrawal symptoms. What that would look like with pornography or sex addiction is a lot of anxiety or irritability, that kind of thing. The irritability stemming from the anxiety of like, I don't have it and I need this fixed because my body, my brain are used to being at this level of stimulation and I need more stimulation. That's why I'm feeling so anxious. And then could also be the substance is taken to relieve or avoid the withdrawal symptoms. So, like I said, there's like 11 of those, and then you would categorize it in the severity from like mild to moderate or severe, depending on how many symptoms it is that you fit for that. Why is this relevant? Conclusively, right? Because we are here. We're social workers. We are mental health providers, and we are excited about, passionate about interested in seeing the world be healthier. That's why we're here on this podcast. And so when we're considering sexual wellness, wellness of families, wellness of relationships, wellness of humanity, that's why we're covering this topic to raise this awareness. There is a woman that I studied under, Joanne Schladel. She's a licensed, or was a licensed marriage and family therapist. And she wrote this whole curriculum on sexual wellness. And I don't have it on me, but I know that she goes off of the definition of whatever the World Health Organization had at the time. But essentially, sexual wellness is being able to emphatically say yes to these experiences, be of the age of consent, etc., to be fully present and really enjoy sexual encounters or lack of sexual encounters and be okay with one's sexual identity and gender and all these other facets. So sexual wellness is a lot, not just that. And also literally the good functioning of the sex organs and things like that and reproductive health and reproduction and like these are how many children they do or don't want, all of these things. And so in a best case scenario, sexual wellness encompasses all these things where it is all working seamlessly together. And it also, under that umbrella, requires somebody to be able to have solid boundaries, self-awareness, be able to say yes, no, etc. It really does encompass a lot. You can see how if we are not practicing that in true alignment with who we are, and if we don't know exactly who we are in order to practice that alignment, it could be really tricky and it can impact self-esteem and the way we show up in relationships, etc. The CSAT field, the Certified Sex Addiction Therapy field, encompasses treating, assessing for, etc. Sex addiction on one end of the continuum, sexual anorexia on the other one. This is too much sex, it's problematic. And on the other hand, it's not enough sex for one reason or other. I feel like I don't deserve good things. I'm restricting for whatever reason. We also have pornography addiction, which is beyond that of which one would call healthy pornography use. Debatable if pornography use is like able to be healthy or not. We're not sure, but we're
Listen,
not going to go there today. Not today.
yes.
We have a whole other
A
episode.
whole nother episode on that.
Yeah, called Let's Talk About Sex, Baby. So we'll get there. We'll talk about that more. Then we have love addiction and love anorexia. Those are also on another spectrum of continuum because, again, it's all attachment based, it's all relational. So, yes, love addiction is what you would think it would be. We'll also have other episodes on that. But that is literally like being attracted to the relationships. It's that person that can't be a single for very long, at minimum, or romanticize relationships, romanticizes life all the time, that kind of thing. It's possible to do that, yes. And then also it's possible to be out of alignment or just excessive. Love anorexia is like, no, I'm gonna swear off all relationships. I won't let anybody get close to me. Like, I hear that. And again, we're made for connection. So the balance is somewhere in the middle, and we're just really trying to educate you so that you can be mindful of what it is that you're going through, where you are, why you do what you do, so that you can build more mindfulness and lead a more intentional life. And then we have betrayal trauma, which is when you experience that betrayal from the sex and or porn addiction. So being able to work through that trauma. And then we have the recovering couples work, having a couple where there is someone or both partners or multiple partners, right? If we're doing that couples work, that relational work of the addiction and then the betrayed people or parties. It's a pretty great field. Lots of people with really big hearts, lots of very competent, very experienced, very skillful clinicians that I've ever met in the field. Really passionate about what they do, about educating people. Just want to throw that out there.
I'm just thinking, like the level of competency required to step into working with folks with anything regarding sex, because the sex is biological, psychological, and there is always the thing around power, values, and a conditioning for you to have values that may not even be yours. So yeah, like it's definitely some work that like stepping into. I was like, oh, okay, okay, okay. Like, let me tell you, the best mental health professional. There's a lot of reflection on what is happening for you. And working with folks with compulsive sexual behaviors definitely requires having that space. It requires a real non-judgmental presence, really being able to listen in a way that I think ups the ante.
100%. It's like, but wait, there's more.
There's always more.
There's
Wait a
always
minute,
more.
what?
Yes. And we've only scratched the surface today, folks. Very, very interesting field. Within that, I do want to say there are sex therapists, which is a slightly different field, and they have a wellness perspective more where we have more of an addictive perspective. You know, we each have flexibility, but there's sex therapists, there are PSAPs as well, lots of different professionals that work interdisciplinarily. And then there's cross addictions too. Oftentimes, you don't just have sex addiction, you also have an eating disorder, you also have a chemical dependency of some kind. It's really complex. Remember to take care of yourself. This is a lot. If you're wanting to use this as a self-growth tool, I encourage you to go back, listen to the different things that stood out to you or that cause anxiety, shock, or anything like that. Research that, see what resonates, see why it shocks you. See if you can find someone to work through that with you. Thank you again for watching, and we hope that you'll watch us again or listen to us again as we delve into these topics even further. If you'd like to collaborate with us, find us, view more of our work, please look down below in the show notes for more information. Bye.